Hi friends, today we will discuss the topic, the rise of Islam in Nigeria, shocking history revealed. The rise of Islam in Nigeria is a compelling story that intertwines religion, history, politics, colonial interference, local rivalries, and shifting identities. As one of the most populous African nations with over 200 million people, Nigeria holds the distinction of having one of the largest Muslim populations on the continent, estimated at over 100 million. However, the widespread presence of Islam in the region did not occur overnight. Instead, it evolved over centuries through trade, conquest, diplomacy, resistance, and transformation of indigenous institutions. To understand how Islam came to play such a vital role in shaping the socio-political and cultural landscape of Nigeria, one must go back to the early centuries of the first millennium when Islam first began to make inroads into West Africa. Contrary to the belief that Islam was introduced to Nigeria through violent means or forced conversions, its initial spread was mostly peaceful, driven by long-distance traders who connected the Middle East and North Africa to the western regions of sub-Saharan Africa. These traders were mostly Berbers and Arabs who traversed the Sahara Desert, trading salt, textiles, and other commodities for gold, ivory, and enslaved people. As early as the 8th and 9th centuries, Muslim traders reached the kingdoms of the Sahel and the Savannah Belt, including the Kanem-Bornu Empire and the Hausa city-states. These traders not only brought goods but also brought books, knowledge, and religion. It was during this time that the elites of the Kanem Empire, which lies in modern-day northeastern Nigeria and parts of Chad, began to convert to Islam. By the 11th century, Kanem's rulers had formally adopted Islam, turning it into an Islamic monarchy that maintained strong relations with North African Islamic centers like Fez, Tripoli, and Cairo. This early contact was crucial in laying the foundation for what would become a massive Islamic transformation in Nigeria. Kanem-Bornu was not the only kingdom touched by Islam. The Hausa city-states, such as Kano, Katsina, Zaria, and Gobir, began to develop intricate trade relations with North African Islamic centers. These city-states, while still largely governed by traditional animist beliefs, welcomed Muslim scholars and traders. The result was a gradual Islamization of the elite class. By the 14th century, many Hausa rulers had begun to embrace Islam to enhance their prestige, improve their diplomatic credentials, and gain access to the Islamic knowledge network that stretched from Timbuktu to Cairo and Mecca. It was during this period that the region saw the construction of mosques, the introduction of Islamic jurisprudence, Sharia, and the rise of Islamic clerics as powerful political advisors. Yet, despite these developments, Islam remained largely a religion of the ruling class and urban centers. The common people, especially those in rural and pastoral areas, continued to adhere to their indigenous religious systems. A major shift occurred in the 18th and early 19th centuries with the rise of Islamic reform movements in West Africa, inspired by the teachings of North African scholars and fueled by dissatisfaction with the syncretism and corruption seen in many Muslim-ruled states. It was in this environment that Usman Dan Fodio, a Fulani Islamic scholar and reformer, launched the Sokoto Jihad in 1804. This was not merely a religious movement, it was a full-scale socio-political revolution. Usman Dan Fodio, disillusioned by what he viewed as the moral and religious decline of the Hausa rulers, called for a return to pure Islam based on the Quran and the Sunnah. His message resonated not only with the Fulani pastoralists but also with the Hausa peasantry and marginalized urban dwellers who felt oppressed by the existing aristocracy. The jihad quickly gained momentum, sweeping through northern Nigeria and toppling several Hausa kingdoms. By 1809, Usman Dan Fodio had established the Sokoto Caliphate, one of the largest pre-colonial empires in Africa, covering much of what is now northern Nigeria and parts of neighboring countries. The Sokoto Caliphate was a theocratic state governed by Islamic law and administered by a network of emirs loyal to the caliph in Sokoto. It was a highly organized polity with a sophisticated bureaucracy, a codified legal system, and a well-developed educational system based on Islamic principles. Thousands of Quranic schools were established, literacy rates among Muslims soared, and scholarship flourished. Women were also encouraged to pursue education. Osman Dan Fodio's daughter, Nana Asma'u, became one of the most influential Muslim scholars and poets of her time. The Sokoto Caliphate fundamentally altered the religious, cultural, and political trajectory of northern Nigeria. Islam became the dominant faith not only of the ruling elite but also of the masses. It was during this time that Islam penetrated rural areas, replacing or coexisting with indigenous religious beliefs. Islamic customs became ingrained in marriage, trade, inheritance, and community life. The Arabic script was widely adopted, and Islamic architecture became prominent across the region. However, the rise of European colonialism in the 19th century posed a new threat to the Islamic order. The British, in their quest to control the lucrative resources of Nigeria, launched military expeditions into the north. By 1903, they had defeated the Sokoto Caliphate and incorporated it into the Northern Protectorate of colonial Nigeria. Yet, in a rather paradoxical twist, the British did not dismantle the Islamic structure, they preserved it. Through their policy of indirect rule, they governed the north through existing emirs and Islamic institutions. This was not out of respect for Islam, but out of convenience. The British found it easier to manage the region by co-opting the established Muslim hierarchy. While this preserved the status of Islam in northern Nigeria, it also stunted political modernization and maintained a conservative Islamic orthodoxy that resisted Western education and innovation. In contrast, the southern regions of Nigeria, dominated by the Yoruba and Igbo ethnic groups, were exposed to Christian missionaries, Western education, and economic opportunities. This religious and developmental divide created long-lasting tensions between the predominantly Muslim North and the largely Christian South. By the time Nigeria gained independence in 1960, these tensions had become deeply entrenched. Post-independence Nigeria saw the rise of political parties with strong religious and regional affiliations. While Islam remained a unifying force in the north, it was increasingly politicized. Various military coups and political crises further deepened the divide. The introduction of Sharia law in several northern states in the early 2000s reignited national debates about secularism, religious freedom, and federalism. Critics viewed it as a violation of Nigeria's secular constitution, while proponents saw it as a return to moral order. The 21st century brought new challenges. Radical Islamist groups, most notably Boko Haram, emerged in the northeast. Claiming inspiration from Osman Dan Fodio but operating with extremist and violent tactics, Boko Haram declared war against the Nigerian state and Western influence, especially Western education. Their insurgency has resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of people and the displacement of millions. This violence, however, should not be seen as representative of Nigerian Islam. The vast majority of Nigerian Muslims reject extremism. In fact, many Islamic scholars and clerics have been at the forefront of the fight against radicalization, promoting peace, tolerance, and interfaith dialogue. Today, Islam in Nigeria is a deeply rooted, multifaceted phenomenon. It encompasses a wide range of practices and interpretations, from the conservative Salafist movements to the more syncretic Sufi traditions like the Tijaniya and Qadiriyya orders. Islam influences every aspect of life in the northern states, from governance to education to gender roles. Islamic schools, known as madrasas or Quranic schools, are widespread. In many cases, these schools have been criticized for their poor infrastructure and their role in youth marginalization, but recent reforms have aimed to integrate Islamic and Western curricula to provide better educational outcomes. Moreover, the Nigerian Muslim community is not monolithic. Ethnic identity plays a significant role in shaping religious expression. The Hausa Fulani Muslims in the north are distinct in culture and practice from the Yoruba Muslims in the southwest, who often combine Islamic rituals with indigenous Yoruba traditions. The Yoruba, for instance, have a long history of religious pluralism, and interfaith marriages between Muslims and Christians are not uncommon. In contrast, in parts of the north, religious boundaries are more rigid, and interfaith interactions can be sources of tension. Islamic organizations and movements continue to shape the Nigerian religious and political landscape. Groups like Jama'atu Nasril Islam, JNI, Azala, JIBWIS, and various Sufi orders provide social services, education, and political advocacy. Nigerian Muslims are also actively involved in international Islamic networks, participating in global dialogues on Islam, education, development, and human rights. Nigeria has produced several internationally recognized Islamic scholars who have contributed to jurisprudence, theology, and social reform. Statistically, Islam remains one of the two dominant religions in Nigeria. According to the Pew Research Center and various national surveys, roughly 50% of Nigeria's population is Muslim, though estimates vary depending on the methodology. The states with the highest concentration of Muslims include Kano, Sokoto, Borno, Yobe, Katsina, Zamfara, and Bauchi. In these areas, Islamic values influence not just personal behavior but also legislation and governance. Islamic banking, halal certification, and Sharia courts are increasingly visible features of economic and legal life. In conclusion, the rise of Islam in Nigeria is a story of adaptation, reform, resilience, and transformation. From its humble beginnings through trans-Saharan trade to its establishment through jihad and caliphate governance, and finally to its modern-day challenges and complexities, Islam has remained a dynamic force in Nigerian history. It is neither a relic of the past nor a monolithic identity. It is a living tradition that continues to evolve with Nigeria's shifting political, economic, and cultural landscape. What is often overlooked is that Islam's spread in Nigeria was not simply a matter of religious zeal or conquest. It was also a response to social injustice, a quest for knowledge, and a strategy for survival in a rapidly changing world. Despite the challenges posed by extremism, political manipulation, and socio-economic disparities, the Muslim community in Nigeria continues to play a pivotal role in the nation's journey toward unity, development, and peace. Thanks for watching the channel.